In this review of the week's news, City Council rates went up, Christmas decorations are coming down, and the stress just won't go away. This is CTV News Week in Review. I'm Grant Mangan. The Christchurch City Council made cost-cutting decisions this week, including raising rates and looking long and hard at Christmas decorations.
The Christchurch City Council was focused on their finances at today's meeting, starting with hiking rates to 7.48%.
People will still find that tough, but I feel very happy that we've put our heads together to do our best to try and bring that figure down as much as we can for our ratepayers without jeopardising, as far as possible, the income we need to keep the city running.
Rates weren't expected to rise, but March's flooding set the council back. And Christchurch City Councillor Glenn Livingston believes it's a sign of the tough times in the city.
And when you think about it, we've had a big earthquake and the effects will be felt for some time. And one of these effects is these rate increases.
The council is also saving their pennies and opting not to deck the halls with boughs of holly this year, saying goodbye to Christmas decorations in the city. It'll save them $55,000, the cost of putting up the decorations each year. Councillors at today's meeting were torn over the decision. Councillor Jamie Goff argued he didn't want to be part of the council that cancels Christmas. And Deputy Mayor Vicky Buck says Christmas decorations were important because they are part of the magic for children. But the decision had the full backing of Mayor Leanne Dalzell, who believes the council shouldn't be spending ratepayers' money on decorations under the circumstances. The council will also be saving $20,000 a year by not swapping out street banners around the city for 12 months. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
Labor announced new policy this week that would ensure landowners of red-zoned flat land would get a 100% buyout offer based on their 2007 valuations.
Labor's new 100% buyout policy for red-zoned flatland properties is groundbreaking news for the Port Hills landowners. 3 years today from when the government first introduced red zoning, Labor's Canterbury Recovery spokesperson Ruth Dyson was delighted to announce, if elected, less than $25 million will be designated to saving just under 100 flatland properties.
So to give all these families certainty and fairness will cost less for taxpayers' money than it will for what Jerry Brownlee is spending on a playground in the CBD.
Lee Osborne is a South Shore resident who lost her land to the earthquakes. Osborne is frustrated that the national government had not offered more than 50% of her land valuation from 2007. A part of the Quake Outcast group, Lee Osborne says she is thrilled to finally see some action.
When John Key said, hey, no one will lose equity, after these quakes, we thought, oh, well, at least we'll be okay, financially, as well as having all the heartache and everything else that's happened. And then, of course, they turn around and do this. So I'm not quite sure what happened to that statement of his.
If there was a spade in the ground and the work begun, the government offer will have been significantly more. Neville Banford and Karen Malule own a red-zoned property in Morgan's Valley. If it was possible to insure the flat land, the Christchurch residents say they would have. Labour MP Clayton Cosgrove says insurance wasn't an option for property owners, and nationally it's still not an option now.
You can't buy what doesn't exist. You can't buy a product that doesn't exist. They could not purchase insurance for bare land because it does not exist. And I think for people outside Canterbury, one of the residents made the point this morning, for people outside Canterbury, I think it's important to make that point.
Neville Bamford says 100% of the land valuation in 2007 is still a long way behind today's market. Although they will still lose close to $50,000, they believe this is the best option for them moving forward.
It really just gives you options again, which and takes a lot of financial pressure and stress off families. So no, it's as I say, it's a common sense decision and something that should really have never come to this situation. But we're very appreciative of Labour's support for our fight.
For those who took the government's 50% offer, if Labour goes ahead, the already paid out residents will not miss out.
If people have accepted a 50% offer, we will top them up to the 100%. The time pressures and the emotional pressures have been huge for people. We would certainly not have people at a disadvantage because they've already settled.
Ruth Dyson says the decision for the Quake outcasts is unlikely to be determined before the September election. Joelle Batista, CTV News.
The Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority released a survey this week that analyses the well-being of young Cantabrians.
94% of young people in Canterbury feel stressed as a result of the earthquakes. Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority Chief Executive Roger Sutton has released new survey results, looking at the well-being of young people in Christchurch following the earthquakes. Roger Sutton says the city is being rebuilt for everyone, but it's important for the younger generation to have a close connection with the new Christchurch.
What their needs are, to make sure we are in tune with what they need to go forward.
Off the back of this announcement, the Associate Education Minister, Nikki Kay, has announced government funding to go to Canterbury's youth sector. $200,000 will go to what's fast becoming the digital literacy revolution. Minister Nikki Kay says the focus is about giving connection access to students, particularly in lower decile schools. Connecting the youth to the greater online world includes plans for uncapped data, faster connections, and at least one device they can use to access the internet at home as well as at school.
It will provide access to personal devices and connectivity from home to help improve student engagement and achievement. In addition, we hope that parents will be able to become more engaged in their students' learning. And I think the key aspect to that is it's not only about having access in the classroom, it's also about having access in the home.
The second funding announcement from Minister Kay was the creation of the Canterbury Youth Initiative Fund. $100,000 will go towards kickstarting initiatives to actively get young people involved. In the Wellbeing Survey, 25% of young people felt the loss of spaces and places in Christchurch following the devastating earthquakes. Minister Nikki Kay is hoping these initiatives will help you feel a part of the city. She also wants them to stay in Christchurch.
Well, there's a huge amount of money going in to make sure that when it comes to things like infrastructure, whether it's our schools, whether it's some of the facilities that Canterbury will have, that young people will want to make their home here in the future.
Fletcher's Construction has committed $50,000 to the project. Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
A 4-storey shopping and office complex will be built on the Triangle Centre site on the corner of Colombo and Cashel Streets.
A world-class shopping, hospitality and office building announced today will be built on the Triangle Centre site in the heart of Christchurch's central city. The 4-storey complex will be built on land, currently the home of a car park found on the corner of Colombo and Cashel Streets. The corner is the former home of the old Triangle Shopping Centre, demolished after being badly damaged in the earthquakes. A key site in the rebuild of City Mall, 2 tenants have been confirmed for the development: ANZ Bank and consulting engineers Becker. The developer is CHC Properties, jointly owned by fashion retailer, property investor and rich lister Tim Glasson and fellow Hallenstein Glasson shareholder and chair Warren Bell. The architects who will develop and deliver the Sydney-made design are Peddle Thorpe, based in Auckland. Architect Brad Luke says it's a fantastic opportunity and Peddle Thorpe is excited to start on this key work in the rebuild. Brad Luke says although the company have worked in the South Island before, it's their first time in Christchurch.
I think it's a gem right in the centre of the town. It will activate the retail precinct extremely well and provide a whole lot of population through the office floors above.
The ground floor is planned to be a retail and hospitality area, while the 3 floors above will be leased as office space. Leading bank ANZ also announced today the new complex will be the home of their Canterbury corporate office. Named the ANZ Centre, the bank planned to move in early 2017 and combine 200 of their corporate employees currently working in 4 sites across the city, all under one roof. ANZ's New Zealand Chief Executive David Hisco says ANZ are proud to put a stake into the Canterbury ground and commit to a substantial long-term presence in the CBD. The larger tenant, Becker, is one of the largest professional services company. Managing Director of Becca New Zealand, Don Lyons, says the company are delighted to be returning to the Christchurch CBD. Becca has 300 staff that will move into the complex, all of which are currently working in several sites across Canterbury. After 50 years of being a part of the Christchurch community, Don Lyons says Becca are very optimistic about the future and look forward to relocating to such an exciting new home. Construction work will begin in early August and expected to be completed at the end of 2016. Joelle Batista, CTV News.
Coming up, there's relief for locals feeling stressed. Locals are still feeling the stress 3 years on from the earthquakes, but the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority is doing its best to help them out.
More than 3 years on from the February 2011 earthquakes, and locals are still feeling the effects of it all.
For some people, they feel that their recovery is beginning. Maybe their house has been repaired or rebuilt. Some of the other changes in their lives have probably bedded in. But for a lot of people, it's really hard, and it's hard waiting. And so help with the waiting is an important factor.
Michelle Mitchell is Sarah's Deputy Chief Executive of Social and Cultural Recovery. She's been involved with response and recovery work since the September 2011 earthquake. Following the large shakes, people faced anxiety from earthquakes and aftershocks. But now, secondary stresses are what's fueling people's state of mind in Christchurch.
Yep, so those needs differ depending on each individual household and also where people are at with their personal recoveries.
The Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority have developed this strategy, identifying what individuals and communities need for effective psychosocial recovery in the next 3 years. The strategy will guide non-governmental agencies and community groups, highlighting ongoing needs and pointing people to the right place to get support.
So some of the community stuff could be new neighbourhoods as they're being established because people have moved, or the neighbourhoods that are left with lots of people that have departed, and how do they work their social connections and make sure that people are being looked after and that agencies are being brought in when they need to be.
Since the September earthquakes, support coordinators have helped over 7,000 households. With this new strategy, that number will grow even bigger. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
20 brand new defibrillators were bought for St John ambulances and response vehicles out of $400,000 raised in fundraising money.
$400,000 is the cost St John paid for 20 brand new defibrillators, a small price to pay for survival. St John recently invested in the new life-saving equipment for every ambulance and response vehicle in Christchurch. The price was paid by generous donations, collection buckets and community fundraising. St John's Service Improvement Manager and Intensive Care Paramedic, Kurt Ward, says St John are thrilled with the community response.
We've had a very good fundraising year within Christchurch. The community's been very generous, and I think that the key aspect there is the money that we get ultimately goes back to the community because it's used to deliver community services.
The defibrillator is a key piece of equipment for the service. The machines are used to restart the heartbeat in instances of cardiac arrest, but also to monitor blood pressure and the heartbeat rate for almost every patient that enters the ambulance. In his 10 years working as a paramedic, Kurt Ward has seen so many lives saved by the defibrillators, he's lost count.
Within Christchurch, there's normally about one cardiac arrest in the community a day, so about one patient a day would receive a shock from us, sometimes multiple shocks. In regards to all the other functions, so blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation, every patient we come in contact with gets a very simple set of those baselines. So every patient that we go to has some sort of involvement from the machine.
This is the first time for St John and Christchurch that all the machines are the same world-class brand. Consistency across the fleet is important, as defibrillators need to be replaced every 8 years. Kurt Ward says this opens up opportunities for the service to improve. Early identification of symptoms are sent to the hospital, allowing them to be ready to tackle the problem head-on.
This means that the right vital signs are sampled and allow us to transmit them to a receiving facility so we can ensure that the right teams are mobilised early on, especially in regards to heart attack patients or stroke patients.
Learning about the many functions of the machine, I was connected up to test it out.
So what does my heart rate tell you?
Sure, so we'll do a wee print. So we're pushing the print button over here. I'm upside down at the moment, so just excuse that. So when we look at ECGs, we look at a number of things, rate, rhythm, regularity, and all the wee spikes to make sure all the wee spikes are in the right area. So when I look at your ECG, all the spikes are where they need to be, all the perimeters of the widths of them are fine, and your heart rate's sitting in around about 80 beats per minute. So for your age, that's perfectly fine and normal.
St John would like to say a big thank you to all who gave, helping them save Cantabrians daily. Joelle Batista, CTV News.
Still to come, the Central City Blueprint is 2 years old. Next month marks 2 years since the release of the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan. The document outlined the anchor projects, providing a map for the rebuild of the damaged city centre. 2 years on, Marcus Gibbs spoke with the man in charge of the design, who's now overseeing the blueprint as it moves off the paper and becomes reality.
2 years ago, the blueprint for Christchurch's rebuild was announced. It featured grand anchor projects that would draw commercial investment, businesses and residents back into the central city. Don Miskell was one of the leaders of the consortium, which worked to prepare the blueprint in 100 days. For his efforts, he recently became an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit. Today we met him on the edge of the Avon River as his vision for the central city comes to life.
It's very exciting. This is the first of the anchor projects that's really going to get underway. We've been working on the design for over a year now, and very soon we'll start to see some outer river works construction start.
The Avon River Precinct is a $90 million project spanning 3.2 kilometres down the river. While there's no denying this work is well underway, there have been recent media reports criticising the government for a slow rebuild.
And I think for a lot of people, we took down the buildings too quickly and we're probably too slow. I've heard some people say that recently we've turned a corner. I don't believe we've turned a corner. Just all the hard work that's been going on behind the scenes, building the foundations, are now starting to show.
The government is now seeking an additional $50 million in private sector investment. The campaign would look to find extra funding for at least 4 projects: the Central Library, the Margaret Mayhew Family Playground, the Metro Sports Facility and the Avon River Precinct and its planned art trail.
It was always our intention that we would seek some additional support from the philanthropic community to help us really put the icing on the cake for some of the projects.
Developers like the colourful Anthony Goff have been quick to announce their disappointment at a lack of private investment within the central city. Don Miskell says behind the scenes more developers are coming on board.
When I look out the window of our office building there's about $1 billion worth of construction going on in the central city. It's actually not insignificant. And I know, I'm aware of other developers over the next wee while will be ready to announce their developments.
So 2 years on, what would Don change if he could do it all again? It turns out not so much, but many of his original ideas have evolved since the blueprint was first announced. What was once supposed to be solely green space in the east frame has now become a mix of green space and housing.
Because if we really want a vibrant central city, we need 20,000 people living in the central city.
Just 1,500 people living in the east frame would give the city a 25% increase over last year's census figures. That's a goal Miskell's team are working towards. As Don mentioned, the blueprint has changed and evolved. The Christchurch City Council voted to save the town hall, disappointing Miskell. However, the government has since announced the next stage of the Performing Arts Precinct.
I'm now quite excited, in fact very excited about what's going to happen there. There are potentially, there's the music centre is committed to going there. There's 2 other performing arts organisations that are looking closely about relocating there around a performing arts courtyard.
The blueprint designers saw the potential for Christchurch to become a city of lanes, courtyards and squares. Miskell says the arts centre and the way its buildings are laid out is an example of what the city centre could look like once the blueprint is fully realised. Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
They were the heroes who saved lives following the earthquakes. Emma Cropper has the stories of 3 of the men receiving bravery awards this week.
They've become the heroes of February 22nd. 27 people receiving bravery awards for their actions on that devastating day. These 3 policemen were the first at the collapsed CTV site, where 115 were killed, but without their efforts, that number could have been much higher. And it was by chance these 3 were the first at the collapsed building. Before 12:51, they were at a condemned house on Gloucester Street, searching for stolen property.
We needed to get into that house, didn't we? And I remember smashing a window and thinking I was in big trouble for damaging property. Little did I know that half an hour later half the city had fallen down.
Constable Shane Coles was out on a different job, but the moment the quake hit, his natural instincts as a cop kicked in.
Basically we put the lights and sirens on, got all the way to Cashel Street and Cashel Madras, and my first thought was, when did they pull the CTV building down? And then realisation sort of kicked in, and Steve and I jumped out and went and found these guys. So a matter of minutes after the earthquake we were there.
Once on site, it was Sergeant Mike Brooklands who took charge, becoming the police controller on site until 3 a.m. the following morning.
I think it's the people that are around you that actually, it's not brave, but allow you to do some of the things that you did. You couldn't do them by yourself, I don't think.
He was the first to make contact with the police communications team, giving them a situation report and requesting for the fire service and other assistance. He spent hours deploying staff, establishing a grid pattern for the building search and assigning staff to specific areas. But helping in a crisis was part of why he joined the police force.
It was one of our oaths that we swore, and it's the sort of people that the police are. And there's nothing more better thing you can do in this job than do something like that. And I suppose you think about your own family and your own children and things like that, and would hope that someone would do the same for you one day.
With no amount of training ever preparing him for the task at hand.
I don't think any training would cover us for that. I think it was just human instinct on what we did as police.
Along with firefighters and civilians, the trio led several rescues amongst the rubble of the building. A fire had broken out on the lower levels, complicating rescue efforts. And within the first hour, the building's lift tower was disintegrating with each aftershock, putting their lives at risk with each shake.
Throughout that day, and it was a long day, and at certain times I just stopped and looked around, and at no stages I think, oh, this is brave. I kind of thought, what just happened? This is just too much.
Initially, they freed a woman and 2 children, then searched for audible tapping or voices, managing to pinpoint the locations of 8 survivors. They heard a woman calling for help in the burning area of the building. Making several attempts to reach her, they wrapped wet clothing around their heads to protect against heat and smoke. Climbing down inside the building, they managed to reach the woman and pull her free, before it became engulfed by flames and smoke.
I'd honestly say I've never been so petrified in all my life.
A coroner's report criticised nearly every aspect of the fire service's response that day, but the police force don't believe they would have acted any different.
I think unless you're there, unless you're on that building, don't criticise. Because you don't know, you don't have the emotive side of things, or the risk factors that are involved, or everything else that's going on.
But at the end of the day, the 3 believe they were acting the only way they knew how.
Didn't really think too much about what I was doing. It was just a case of that's the job, and it wasn't even that's the job. It was more of just being a human and just doing what I thought was best.
From their rescue efforts, 6 lives were saved from the collapsed CTV building, but that day hasn't changed their lives.
I suppose every experience you go through changes you a little bit, but as far as how I look at things, no, I'm the same person.
When I look back on it, I wouldn't change a thing. I'd go back on that onto the CTV site again and do what we've done.
It's thanks to people like these three that so many lives were saved on one of Christchurch's darkest days. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
That's CTV News Week in Review. I'm Grant Mangan. Have a great weekend.